today is make this as interactive as possible. You know, it's sort of like teaching a class in a lot of ways. Just I prepared a rather formal presentation to work off of, but certainly if we just want to have a conversation as I go along, that would be great. Not a problem for me. So don't feel like raising a hand and asking a question in the middle of something is a bad idea. That'd be a good idea. We can have a little bit of a good talk with this. Well, this conference is about challenges, and I hope practical, achievable solutions that are not rooted in ideology. My area is education, and we are no strangers to challenges in ideology. What makes education a little different and much more elusive in terms of these kinds of discussions is that everyone is an expert. I don't think most of us would claim that we have expertise in energy or growth management. But everyone seems to believe they have a pretty good idea and a pretty good handle on what ought to happen with schools. Certainly that means applying education solutions from the perspective of one's own educational background, how you had school, along with some deeply held conviction, either the power of competition or something like that. Putting these things together is how we decide on what we think about schooling. And often these things become political discussions, but they certainly shouldn't, because that almost always misses the point. One of my goals today is to focus the discussion on what I believe is good and what works for young people, all young people, not just some young people, and how independent schools work to achieve that. What we're concerned with is simply this: what makes young people enter adulthood with a strong intellectual foundation, confident in their ability to continue to learn and adapt, committed to ethical behavior, and capable of interacting successfully in a global environment? Isn't that all that really matters? That's what we're talking about. This afternoon, my purpose is to speak briefly about one small sector of the K through 12 landscape, and that is what we call independent schools. Maybe even a term you're not familiar with, because I think everyone's sort of familiar with the term private schools. But I do want to point out what the differences may be between independent schools and private schools in general. So I want to talk about that small sector and what we believe we have to offer to this conversation. And I really appreciate this opportunity, because I rarely have an opportunity to talk about this topic and present the story, the case for independent schools outside of my world, which is talking to other independent school people, parents, kids, board members, things like that, because we really don't get out and talk publicly enough. So first, let me start with the definition. Independent schools are distinct from other schools in that they are primarily supported by tuition, charitable contributions, and endowment income, rather than state or church funds. At my school, we get no funds from any outside organization that is connected with the government, or a church, or a synagogue, or a mosque, or anything like that. It's all very, very independent. Most of the long-standing and most successful independent schools in the United States are members of an organization called the National Association of Independent Schools. And to be eligible for membership in NAIS, a school must be independently governed by a board of trustees. It must practice non-discriminatory policies, be accredited by an approved state or regional accrediting organization, and hold not-for-profit 501c3 status. So if you don't have all of that, we would consider you an independent school. Now, independent schools exist as a rather tiny sector within the diverse world of American pre-12 education, pre-K-12 education. Out of a school-age population of roughly 49 to 50 million, the numbers change year to year, but around there, 49 to 50 million people, about 10% attend private schools. Sometimes 11, sometimes 9.5, it's been as high as 11.5, but it's really always in about that range. So out of that 10% attend independent schools, as I have defined them. So some are religious, some are secular. So we are a small group, historically hovering around the 1% level of the school-age population. Relative numbers notwithstanding, I have no doubt that many of you have heard at least of some of the bigger or more prestigious, more powerful or influential of our group, the Exeters, the Andovers, Chokes, places like that. These are names that most people sort of have a recognition for. That immediately raises the specter of sort of elitism, and, when those names are mentioned, well, they're very different for all these other reasons. So I think it'd be a good idea for me to begin by just addressing a few myths. And the first one is, they are basically unaffordable and available only for the rich. That's certainly something we hear all the time. And I must be honest with you, this was probably accurate before World War II. But certainly things changed after World War II a great deal. While it is true that many of the people in our schools with means, many people with means that are in our schools, now we're talking about sort of the top quintile, I would call it the fifth quintile of income, comprise almost half our population. In my particular school, it's more like 40%. That's 40% of our population. The rest come from the other 4 quintiles, and they're quite evenly distributed, particularly in the South and the Southwest. In the Northeast, that's changing because the financial aid has been going to the students at the bottom 2 quintiles, creating what we are concerned with is what we call the barbell effect. A whole bunch of people from this economic group and a whole bunch of people from this, and the people in the middle not involved. And so, but you'd see a lot less of that in the Southeast and the Southwest because we're not as expensive. And therefore, we're able to attract people rather evenly from the different income bands. The people in the 4th quintile typically don't get financial aid, but work really, really hard or take 2 jobs or more. Don't buy the car, don't go on the vacation, whatever it is it takes to send their kids. The people in the next 3 quintiles typically receive some sort of financial aid, and that is need-based. And it would go to almost complete financial aid to as little as 10%. And everything in between. But even for the people who get 90%, what's left is still a big sacrifice. It is rare that an independent school will get 100% for the simple reason that we want everyone's buy-in, even if it's to not the ouch point, but to be a participant and to feel like a full participant in the school. So it costs a little bit of money, but people are making a sacrifice for top quality education for their children. Independent schools are not cheap, but a good faculty is not cheap. Having the kind of value-added programs we have is not cheap, and we can't do it on the cheap. Otherwise, we are not offering what we want to offer. Second point, we lack diversity. Back to the old days, that was really true, and at least diversity in terms of racial and ethnic diversity, but not anymore. And we know, and it is in our principles of good practice, that we want to provide our students with an experience with other students from diverse backgrounds. We know that's good. Public schools, by the way, are typically rather tied to neighborhoods, and they're given residential, and given their residential housing patterns, are sometimes less diverse than independent schools. You'd be surprised at what our diversity numbers would be at a place like Gainesville. It's a little higher than most people would imagine. Number 3, independent schools are only for really smart kids. Well, we do believe that we graduate smart kids. The fact is that independent schools have always been populated by students from a wide spectrum of native intelligence. Always. And it's a concept we don't worry too much about, frankly. We are much more concerned with creating conditions that benefit all learners, regardless of background. By and large, independent schools attract students of average to above average ability, and sometimes students with significant learning differences. What is important is that we try to serve them all well. Very often, I'd be in town here and someone says, you got all the smart kids over there. Well, we do have some smart kids, but we don't have all of them. And not all of our kids are having an easy time with it. A lot of them really struggle and have to work really hard. So it's quite a diverse group intellectually. And independent schools always have been. They didn't used to be diverse financially, but being financially well off doesn't guarantee that your kids are great students. And so the schools had always to learn how to work with all different levels. So what is it that we model that is different enough that we think we we should and could share some of what we do with everybody else. And the first thing I think is the central importance of mission. And that's a word we throw around a lot in independent schools, to the point of maybe too much, but we talk about it all the time. Independent schools are mission-driven. We exist for certain reasons. Independent schools are free to determine our vision, our core values, our environments, and our strategic priorities. And I know that's a huge advantage. That is, in my opinion, our real advantage, is that we can define ourselves, we can find what we want to do and how we want to do it, largely freely. And you know, many of us can define our constituents. Less so, again, in the Sun Belt than in other parts of the country, because for all kinds of different reasons. But so in any case, but one thing that you can say about independent schools' missions, as different as they are, they're almost always based on core values that include academics for all, not just some of our kids, high expectations for all of our students, and character education for all of our students. And those three things, academics for all, there's no wiggling out of an academic program in an independent school. We use lots and lots of strategies to get you to the end point, because we have to, because we believe in it, in those academics for everybody here. High expectations for all, that's something people assume. And the character education is the reason a lot of people do go to independent schools. They actually don't go to independent schools necessarily just for the academics. So the importance becomes critical in many ways. We know who we are. We know what we're trying to accomplish with young people. We do not bend to the latest trend, but we are nimble enough to embrace great ideas when we see them. And that's an important thing. I had recently had a conversation with an admissions director at one of the major universities, state universities in Florida. And this is a dinner conversation. We're discussing the difference. You know, I'm always asking, how do our kids stack up? How are they doing? All of these kinds of questions, and what's the difference? And he said, and I was really very happy to hear this, his comment was, well, we like your kids because independent school missions are strong. And what he meant by that, not that we have great core values or character education, what he meant is that when they see a B in Algebra 2 on a transcript, they actually know exactly what that means. It means that kid did pretty well. And that student finished the book. They had 45 to 50 minutes of class every single day. They had a pretty hard exam, and he made it. And that's true now, and that's been true for a long time. Another example of the importance of mission is how it impacts our priorities. A recent survey that I just got back literally 2 weeks ago of NIS schools concerning how we responded to the economic downturn and concerns of the last 4 years was very revealing. Because they gave us all kinds of things, and what did you do to get through this difficult time? And asked us all kinds of questions. And it was interesting. Asked what program adjustments independent schools made since the fall of 2008. 1% cut arts offerings, and just under 2% cut athletics offerings. And what that says is that as an industry, as a sector of education, we did not cut programs for students. We cut a bunch of stuff you couldn't see, but we didn't cut programs for students. That's being mission-driven, that's being committed to the whole child, every child. And I would ask you to contrast that with other sectors where the cuts came and how the cuts came. There's even talk of going to a 4-day week in some places, which would be a real difficult thing. Second, I think we need to consider this, what I've been talking about with this notion of education for all. So I said earlier that independent schools are relatively diverse and work with young people with a wide range of intellectual abilities. I'll add to the fact that even though we've had this increasingly diverse student population, it has come with very little adjustment in academic standards. So it hasn't mattered to independent schools that the ethnic and racial diversity in these schools has changed. Academic standards are the same, and students are meeting the same. I would actually argue that the academic standards have gotten a lot more difficult than maybe 30 or 40 years ago. The number of students doing Algebra 1 in something like 7th grade or taking AP Physics in 10th grade is like, well. I don't know how many of you could have done that, but we're seeing more and more of that, and kids are handling it. So we've got some kids that are working hard. So I would say that there's very little adjustment or no adjustment in academic standards, which says that all our students can attain a strong academic foundation. So why is that? Well, the simple answer, I think, is that independent schools really buy into this thing called the growth mindset. This is, I don't know if you've read Carol Dweck's work. I would recommend it to you on mindset. It's very, very good, but it's research that indicates clearly that success comes largely from hard work and optimal conditions. And we're talking about school success. Hard work, good conditions, and a lot of support for hard work. In fact, an emphasis on one's native intelligence is typically counterproductive. Students do worse in school the more they are told how bright they are, and the less hard work is emphasized. And you read through their work and they talk to kids and they say, well, you know, you're really smart, well, you really did well on that. The work, but you must have worked really hard for that. Really hard. You're going to work just, the kids who hear that message, you worked hard, congratulations, encouraging, tend to work harder and harder and harder and enjoy it, while the kids are told, well, you're very smart, work less and less hard as they get along, because they think it's not connected to hard work. It's interesting. So independent schools buy into this. We work hard to create those optimal conditions for what Malcolm Gladwell in his book, Outliers, describes as formative for highly successful people. Again, same thing, same message. They have the capacity for hard work and find themselves in situations that almost always demand hard work from them. A personal anecdote from Gainesville, and just to sort of illustrate how this kind of plays out. A girl came to us in 10th grade from local public high school. Good school. She's a very bright girl. You know, it's not like she wasn't doing well at that school. She was doing beautifully there. She was getting straight A's. Her parents were a little suspicious of those straight A's because she didn't do any homework. And she was like, it's cool, I get it done in school, or I do it after school, and all that kind of stuff. They said, we're not seeing it. Why don't we just try another place? And she really didn't want to come. So she came along rather grudgingly. But high-achieving kid, really hard work, and already had all those things kind of instilled in her. And then we pushed her harder, and she just kept rising to the challenge. And within, I don't know, 6 months, she was right at the top of her class. And we said, okay, this is a great kid. We're very fortunate to have her. And so she came out at the top of her class at the end. And after graduation, she got into the honors program at UF. Right at the top, everything's paid for, great thing, and she was very happy to be in that. Sometime around October, she kind of came back to school to visit, say hi to a bunch of people, and see how it was going, visit her old teachers. And she found out the physics teacher, and she kind of confronted him. And she said, you know what? You were unfair. You made me work really, really hard. And you gave me a B. And, you know, I still remember that because it was just so hard. You kept kind of pushing me. And you just didn't lay off. And he said, well, I'm sorry, I thought it was that you really think it's best for you in the end. And she said, well, it really isn't, because let me just tell you, in my classes are all those kids that were in high school with me in 9th grade, and they're in honors program at UF, and they tell me I was kind of a sucker to work so hard in high school, because they got it. So it got a little steamed, and I actually kind of had to, not intervene, but I said, how are you doing? And the conversation kind of went civil, as we were talking about. And it's all fine, and then about 2 months later, just around the winter break time, she comes in to visit, and she spots the physics teacher. She says, whoa, just a second, I'm really sorry, and I take it all back. And he said, what happened? Well, it turns out that a number of the honors program kids she started with were no longer in her honors program. They were done, gone, finished. They either dropped out, flunked out, withdrew, for whatever reason. And she said, in my honors English class, there are only 8 of us now. And they're all from independent schools in the state of Florida. Junior schools in Tampa, Orlando, Gainesville, Tallahassee, and Miami. And they all have the same experience. All very different schools, too. Some are super expensive, some of them not. But all have the same core value of hard work for everybody. Please, you can do this. And she said, I'm sorry, I take it back. I'll never complain about this again, because now I see the value of it. And it took her only 6 months to see the value of it, and I think that was pretty good. So the workload and the preparation requirements were just too much for some of the kids. They hadn't done that. They weren't ready to do more. And they just, these were, and by the way, very bright kids. High SATs, high grades, very capable. I'm sure they're doing great. They just didn't want that then, and maybe later on they picked it up and did all that. I don't know what the outcome is. They could have turned out to be the best students in the I don't know. But I just thought that was a revealing thing, and I hear this all the time. And it's just one person's story, but I think it does kind of exemplify and point out the ideal that we believe in, the value of an independent school, and what it is that we model, and what it is that I think we can share with other schools. Just the general sense of high expectation, the expectation you work hard, and the expectation that other students think it's okay that you're working hard. And that's an important piece of it, for the whole community to think, okay, good for you, you're on the honor roll, rather than, oof, nerd, or, you know, you're one of these people that shouldn't be on the honor roll. And I can see a smile there, and this happens. This happens where academic success is not always valued in high schools. And I'm not saying my kids value it every day, but by the way, they're a bunch of teenagers in high school, and so that's not going to change. So we're here, and I really appreciate Dr. Ridley's presentation this morning about STEM and science and all of that. And we're hearing a lot about that, and I think it's an extremely important conversation. And we're hearing that certainly schools need to be more closely aligned with 21st century work. And I would certainly say that that is correct. But again, this is where an independent school can be nimble and can respond. When we looked at our STEM situation, we said, okay, we have excellent science education in the traditional sense, but not enough untraditional stuff that makes connections. So, who wants to do cool things with kids next year? And I get 4 different things, and people come up, and so 2 years ago we decided, okay, we're going to just blow out our elementary school science program. We're combining it with computers. We're going to do a science and technology program. The kids are going to be interactive. It's going to meet every day. It's been a huge success. And we're talking about science fair. And we revised what we do with science fair to make it more high interest, more, modern in terms of expectations of science, all of that. We took a look and said, we need robotics here. We decided, and we went to parents and, it was a little more pricey than we thought it was going to be to buy some of this stuff. We need help. And the parents said, okay, I'll help you with this. We moved it into the high school. So science, technology, engineering, math, and we've taken physics and algebra 2 and had them sort of team teach 3 of the different units to make sure the kids are seeing the practical applications of both. We have, and then they now host science and math parties, believe it or not, on Friday afternoon. There's a lot of free hot dogs, and you get to do problems and stuff like that until 6. And we had like 50 kids show up for this. Being the history English guy, I was a little bit like, really? One more anecdote. We have a partnership with a school in China. And so we go back and forth with the same school. We want to have a deep, real relationship where we get to know each other, kids and faculty and administrators. So the first time they came over, they took a look at one of these classes we have called the Advanced Chemistry Lab. And I admit I'm as bad as any other English history teacher. When the teacher proposed it to me, I said, Advanced Chemistry Lab? Who's going to take that? Not a very nice thing to say. I wasn't really thinking through this too well. And he said, oh, I know what it is. And so every time, we had to cut it off at 16, because that's what was sort of comfortable in that lab. Well, after 5 years, it's a heck of a course. And he's now produced he's got his own book. It's got 26 tested labs that he can do with kids in a semester, a couple of quickies, some long ones, all different stuff. Lots of good lab work. So the Chinese people came and the science teacher looked at this and said, who made him do this class? And I said, nobody. It was his decision. Well, where did he find the textbook? I said, well, it took him 4 summers, but he wrote it. Well, what did you pay him to write that? I said, well, paid him for materials, a little bit of time, but really not much. Well, who approved this? I said, well, he and I and the upper school head, the 3 of us, thought it was a cool idea, Mr. Department head. And they were just stunned. They couldn't believe that there wasn't a provincial and a city bureaucracy that this went through in order to approve it. We thought it was a cool idea. We thought this guy could deliver it. He guaranteed me a bunch of kids. I was kind of at first surprised, and then the next year I go and watch them operate in the room. I'm thinking, this is pretty much fun. I would not have anticipated. Wouldn't have been something I would have chosen immediately, but apparently we have enough kids that want that sort of thing that enjoy it as just an elective. So, again, strong science, technology, education, math, but within engineering, but within a context. And this is the other important point I want to make, and I'll be about done with all of this, because we still place all of that squarely in the context of a liberal arts education for all. And we believe a liberal education should be the centerpiece of all schooling, and that starts early. And it should be the centerpiece of all schooling for all kids, not just some kids, every single kid, throughout elementary, middle, and the high school level. Our argument is that this liberal education is the best way to prepare good citizens who can think critically, who can think creatively, who will be able to, will at least be prepared to solve problems tomorrow that we cannot even anticipate today. To accomplish those ends, young people need an education that is broad and deep. And that takes resources, time, and commitment. Now, the argument in favor of liberal arts is not about becoming an intellectual or an artist. It's about becoming more fully human, as preparing, and as well as preparing for the unknown world of work in the future. We don't really know where that's going. This is not an argument against a strong technical education. Rather, it is an argument that any professional education or technical education is diminished without the insights and thinking skills inherent in a liberal education. So how about students not going to college, for instance? Well, more and more today's workers they're no longer automatons, and they're going to need some type of post-secondary education. So you need to find college, first of all. Lots of college. It could be 1 year, 2 year, or it could be preparing them for training by a corporation that says, give me a good, solid high school student with good, solid Algebra 2 skills, reads and writes well. We'll train them for the rest. It's kind of like going to college, except the company's paying for it. This is what you'll see in places like Germany a lot. They'll take those good high school kids, make them graduate from high school, start them in an internship at 17. Tell them, sorry, you got to do advanced math. I know we're not requiring you you just got to do advanced math, get out of that. We'll pay you part of the time, and then when you get here, we'll train you 2 more years. So by age 20, you are extremely well prepared. We know you're well schooled because the school's doing their part, and we're sharing you for a couple of years, then you're ours, and we will train you up for the rest. It's a great system, and it is very, very effective. So, in any case, the old-fashioned basic grammar school type of quick high school thing is no longer really an option. And again, it's not about being college prep, it's about being ready for the next level of education that we are all going to need at one point or another. So, for the last 3 or 4 decades, or 5 decades, I don't know, the terms most used to describe our economic society has been the knowledge society or the information age. Well, we're way past that. The argument for liberal education made a lot of sense then, but it makes a whole lot more sense now because we're entering a world that is going to require excellent right-brain skills, lots of creativity, lots of design, lots of empathy, all those different things. I recommend another book. It's sort of a business book that's got legs. Maybe many have read it. It's called A Whole New Mind by a guy named Daniel Pink. He really lays out the argument for strong right-brained education along with all of the technical needs we have. It's again, one of these business books that ended up not being just a 1-year trend. It's still out there and still good. He's got lots of stuff on YouTube. He's fun to listen to as well. So what does all of this relate? Now, the title of this talk is The Public Purpose of Private Education. So how does this all come together? Well, I'd say, first of all, it's our ability to determine our missions that make us essential in every community where we serve students. Part of our public purpose is just being. We provide schooling for lots of kids, and we have the freedom to be unique and design curricula with our students at the center. There are nearly 2,000 of us in North America. That's independent schools, and we touch a lot of lives, leaving a lasting impact on hundreds of thousands of students. Having independent missions, we can be laboratories of teaching and learning. When you look at the educational innovations in our era, you can see the leadership independent schools have provided. And these things began in independent schools. I'll just give you a short list. School choice, charter school, curriculum with consistently high expectations, the absolutely essential role of early childhood education, even the idea of magnet schools, experiential education, sending our kids out camping, doing things, challenges. That began with independent schools, and it largely still is independent schools. The same is true for community service programs. That's an old standing independent school requirement. And honor codes are largely the province of independent schools. Things like this. When you look at the growth of teaching world languages like Chinese or Arabic, these movements started in independent schools. The National Association of Independent Schools has actually formed a really good partnership with the Ministry of Education in China and some other places in order to allow independent schools in the United States and Canada to travel there and meet potential teachers in a central place where you can find out, if you want to have a good Chinese program, you need to have a good native speaker. Or if you do Korean or Japanese or something like that, you need to get some good native speakers. So they've actually facilitated that. Outreach programs with a global focus are now really a mainstay of independent schools. And it's not, again, it's for everybody. We fundraise for these things. Anybody can go. And these days, I would also argue that our adherence to a liberal education for each and every one of our students is becoming an innovation. Because we are moving in another direction. We also model the ideal of being locally focused. We are a local control of public schools. It's often sort of a political football, and there's all kinds of stuff going on with that. But in independent schools, local control is our reality every single day. There is no single model for us to follow, and we stand or fall on our own merits. We may not have the FCAT, but performance is central to our continued existence. We are entirely accountable to our boards and our families. Our contracts are annual. They're not long-term. People shop us every year, every day, every marking period. And they have the freedom to go someplace else that is either free or cheaper. So it's not just a good thing to be respected in our community. We have to be. We don't have a choice, otherwise we're not going to last. And we're also a community resource. We have a lot going on our campus that we allow churches and civic groups. We have two Chinese schools. We have the Taiwan school on Saturday and the Beijing school on Sunday. I mean, we got all kinds of stuff going on. That's probably because we are always scrambling for resources. So I also said that we work hard to be inclusive. We reach out to a wide geographic area, and then American Independent Schools provide hundreds of millions of dollars of financial aid. It is a huge part, the actual benchmark at NAIS for independent schools to try to match in their principles of best practice is between 15 and 18% of budget devoted to financial aid. That's a huge amount. That's millions, in some schools that's millions of dollars. And people aspire to that with lots of need-based financial aid. By pursuing character education, emphasizing citizenship, we aspire to be living models for our students as they become adults. We try to model that on a daily basis. And central to that is an ongoing effort, never finished, unfortunately never perfected, to foster a community that is characterized by decency, where differences are valued. Not easy, and we don't claim to be perfect at it. It is always a struggle, a daily thing that we work with. These are lofty goals, though, and they are our goals, and they are in front of us. Our work in those areas is intentional, and it's daily. So anyhow, we believe in the power of community, and we certainly don't see ourselves as a delivery site for educational resources or academic services. It's much more of a community thing. So we also emphasize leadership and are typically small enough to make sure each and every student has numerous opportunities. This is another thing that we'd like to see all schools be able to do. Find a way to give kids opportunities. Because without an opportunity, it's not going to happen. Certain kids will rise to the top. They'll take the leadership positions. That's it. When it comes to even something like athletics, which we consider very important. So, why do you have rights? What's the emphasis on sports? Well, it's not because we're good. It's because we think it's a good experience. That a lot comes from that. A lot is learned. And if every once in a while we have a good team, good for us. But if, like, this year we go 4-18 in a certain sport, that's okay too. I asked the kids, how'd you do it? They said, we had fun. Good. They had some, talked about having some adversity. That's a whole season full. But didn't diminish their experience. And we make sure everybody plays, starting in 5th grade. Even if you're really not so hot, you know, or, because by the way, you never know in 5th grade what someone's going to be in 10th grade. You don't know. Everybody plays. And if that means we have to have more coaches, or if we have to juggle practice time because it's a real pain and we don't have enough facilities, it's worth it. So the kids don't get new uniforms. So the 6th graders get t-shirts and a pair of shorts. That's okay. They're playing ball of some kind. They're on a team. They're working together. They're getting those life lessons. And it's for everybody, because it's not just for athletes. If athletics in high school is just for athletes, we really have a bad road in front of us, in my opinion. So in any case, I just wanted to give you some insight and understanding about independent schools. Things that most people, an entity that most people don't understand. And I think there's a lot of mythology about us. And I think that's too bad, but that's what it is. We are a big piece of the educational landscape in North America. And we can lead, but we can also learn. And we contribute economically, and we serve many, many kinds of families. So as healthy as I said our sector is, we have some serious challenges that we face. And something that I think this conference is talking about in more general terms, and things that concern us about our very existence. At the top of my list, we talked about this earlier, is high-stakes testing. While we believe achievement testing is extremely important for measuring student success and measuring schools' success, we hate to see that become the centerpiece. It needs to be a piece. We accept that, but we don't want to be judged on a battery of tests, because that's not what our school is necessarily about. The nature of the competition it engenders, particularly in Florida and some other states, does not really improve the real education of young people, and I think sometimes can be a real impediment. So we fight that hard. Most schools, most independent schools in the United States will not get involved with voucher programs or any of those other things for the fear that we may get involved with the state and high-stakes testing. Most independent schools in Florida, for whom one program is intended, don't participate, and that's called Step Up for Students. It used to be called the Corporate Tax Scholarship. It's a thing where corporations can give money to this corporate tax entity, and then it disperses money to private schools. And since it's not going to the state first, they say, well, that's fine, then it's not really state money. Well, we said, oh boy, that smells like a future FCAT stream. Son of a gun, and there's building a house in the center right now, that any school is taking Step Up money, will also have to take the FCAT. I knew it was coming, and we didn't take it because there are powers out there that think we should be doing that. By the way, 80% of the schools in Florida use the Stanford 10 right now, which is the basis for the FCAT, so we know where we stand, and we're not afraid of it. Our kids are in the 80th, 85th, to 90th percentile on the bell curve, and so that's not, we don't want to hide anything, and if we have to do it, we'll do it, but we're not going to spend a lot of time preparing for it. But certainly we're not going to under-prepare our kids if we really touch on it. Another trend that really concerns me personally is rankings. I don't really understand where the obsession with rankings has come from, but do we really want to believe the Newsweek formula, which for a number of years was simply this: divide the number of advanced placement and AP tests taken by the number of seniors in your graduating class, come out with that ratio, and that's how we're going to rank schools in the United States. Remarkable. The guy who invented this, a journalist who had nothing to do with education, thought this up because he thought, hey, I have no idea what would be the way to rank, but this seems reasonable. And that's 10 years ago now, and it is stuck. Obviously, they were copying U.S. News & Report, because that is the biggest moneymaker U.S. News has, is that particular edition. So anyhow, if you look at those lists, you go, where are all the independent schools on that list? We're not there. We don't participate. And by the way, the most excellent school I have ever seen is an independent school of 150 people, the kids, who are all pretty severely learning disabled, who are taught by the most dedicated, well-prepared staff I've ever seen. These kids go on to be extraordinarily successful. Newsweek would rank them at 0. it would be the worst school in America on that formula. So, rankings, I'm not a great fan. As you can see, it's a business model. That's what it is. And another challenge to our ability to operate, the last one I'll mention to you, and this is becoming a significant problem. The cost is unbelievable, the time is unbelievable, and it is compliance. Compliance with everything. New regulations are hitting us hard, and they're hitting us financially, and we're having to add staff just to comply with all kinds of things. I got alphabet soup for you if you want to hear it. I got more acronyms than you can shake a stick at that we need to deal with. I know more about this stuff than I ever wanted to know. I didn't get an education to learn how to fill out a DOL 5500. I certainly didn't get into want to know about Department of Labor 8955-SSA. I mean, we got them all. We are now, I'm now forced to be sort of an ERISA expert. Great. Just what I want to spend my day doing. We're going to have to spend between $15,000 and $30,000 in next year annually on an audit of our 403B program. Thank you, Enron, and all the others that have done fraud. It's trickled down to us. We are going to spend next year close to $100,000 on compliance. Most of you don't know that this is going on in schools because the poor folks in the back end of the business office are grinding away at this stuff. And if they're in a foul mood, ask them if they've been working on compliance issues that day, or if they've had a visit from workers' comp people, or if they've had to do a PCI DSS or a WERA. Sorry, that's a WRERA. Get these things. And of course, there's also the FLA, FLMA, the FHSA, the OSHA, BLS, and everything else. It is endless. And let's not even talk about Sarbanes-Oxley, please. Let's not. So, you get the drift. We worry about this every day, all the time, and it's complicated, and it's not getting any easier. Yes.
What would happen if you didn't comply with all of this stuff?
Number one, we'd be fined. Number two, we would lose our 501c3 status. If we lost our nonprofit status, then we could not raise money, particularly easily. It would frankly kill us.
So you really don't have the freedom that you lose.
No, this is all back office stuff. This is not academic stuff. In the back office, we are no more free than anybody else. And and frankly, it requires a very dedicated staff of people that think, okay, I'll work. I know this isn't what the school wants to spend its money on, so I'll just take on more stuff. So as everybody else is gone at 6 o'clock, you look at the 3 lights on in the back of the business office, you know who's there. Because they're actually getting to the business stuff, paying checks and doing bills and stuff like that. Because they've been on the phone all day with DCF, wondering about background checks for teachers and 4-year-olds. With that change. So, I mean, it's a lot. It's expensive. But, that's what we're dealing with. And anybody wants to give us a little help with that, I'm here to say thank you. So in closing, I just want to say independent schools really are part of the community, pretty much everywhere. And we really want to be at the table when education is the topic. We don't want to feel as though you guys, we're so separate and different and outliers that we really don't need to be there, because we believe we do. And certainly we will do everything in the world to maintain our independence. That is our lifeblood. But we do think we have a great deal to offer. Most independent school leaders believe that a variety of school types is critical in a free country. We are very happy to work in a place with great public schools. That's actually important to us. We claim we serve a public purpose, if not in our funding and our governance, but with our missions. So today the national microscope is on public schools, as it should be, because they serve the vast majority of our students. That's the way it has to be. And their inherent difficulties are there, funding problems are real. And so we realize this. I'd like to give one last quote from a great author, a guy named Arthur Powell, the author of The Shopping Mall High School. Very interesting book. And he says, "Still, the fates of public and private schools are intertwined. Strong public schools are good for privileged schools because they force them to be creative and to justify their high prices. When public schools are perceived as weak and uncompetitive, independent schools often become complacent. And I would say that is a very true statement. Great schools keep us on our toes, motivate us to continue to work hard and do better. And that's a synergy we'd like to share and be a part of the entire community with. So with that, I will say thank you for a lot.